A first away win of the season, the club breaking our transfer record, a couple of new contracts, and a penalty shootout defeat. Well, okay, it wasn't quite the perfect couple of weeks, but we've got lots of good, fun things to talk about here on the Tilehurst End Podcast, episode number 136. Hello, my name is Dan Wimbush, editor of the Tilehurstend.com. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us for this episode. As mentioned, we've got lots to talk about, including deadline day, which, while it was full of bushwalk antics, it wasn't quite full of signings. But nevertheless, we will round up all of the transfer business from the summer and give our verdict on where this leaves Yapstam and his squad right here on the pod. And joining me this week is Tilehurst End assistant editor Mark Mayo. Mark, hello.
How's it going?
Not so bad, thank you yourself. Did you enjoy deadline day, Reading aside? Or even Reading included?
Well, I was working past midnight, as is the journalist's natural instinct on a deadline day. So actually working in Spanish journalism means I get to do it all again today because it's the Spanish deadline today.
Will Mr. Coutinho be Barcelona bound?
Well, I very much doubt it, but it's going to be just the same again. So if you like deadline day, then get into Spanish football because you get two.
Excellent. And joining us as well for his second appearance of the season and third overall, Mr. Ben Greenwood. Ben, hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me again.
Absolute pleasure to have you on board with us. Right, without further ado, then we will delve into the recap. We'll start at St Andrews, where we got a very welcome away win.
View from the Tilehurst End. Recapping this week's championship action.
Birmingham City 0, Reading 2, Mark. First away win of the season, first clean sheet. Are our away woes behind us now?
Well, we actually do quite well at Birmingham recently, didn't we? We'd only taken 2 clean sheets in the calendar year leading up to it, and one of those away from home was at Birmingham. So we've kind of doubled up on that. We obviously know how to play them because Yapstam has a decent enough record against them. I think he hasn't conceded a goal to them yet because we drew 0-0 at home to Birmingham the start of last season. So
sounds about right.
We like playing Birmingham, and we've historically not done too badly against them, and this has fitted into that narrative quite nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, how important was it, though, getting that first 3 points away from home, especially before the close of the transfer window?
Yeah, of course. The quicker you can get that monkey off your back, I suppose, the better. And it's great that they've done that now. I mean, the longer it goes on, the more people like us talk about it and the worse it gets, I suppose. So it's always good to get it out of the way. Yeah,
absolutely. I think, I talked about it in the podcast Extra with Tom Crocker and I think on last week's show as well. It was just such a morale boost to get that away win, and especially with a clean sheet as well. It sort of puts those nagging, not completely those nagging doubts to bed, but it does really sort of ease the pressure, and getting such a comprehensive win away. Birmingham, they had a couple of half chances, but they weren't really, this wasn't a bombardment. This wasn't Sheffield Wednesday in, I think, our only other away clean sheet in the calendar year, where Ali Al-Habsi completely kept us in it. Vito Minone, a couple of stops, but really nothing dramatic. And nice to see the returning John Daddy Bodvarsson, Mark, get himself off the mark.
Well, he was
what I've done there with that link.
Absolutely, and he was someone who, when he came to the club, it was his goal-scoring record that was in doubt a little bit, wasn't it? He'd only got 3 goals, I think, last year at
3
Wolves.
or 4, yeah.
So the fact that he can get off the mark early on is good, and I think it's only his second start for Reading.
Yeah, he got injured on his debut, didn't he, up at QPR?
Yeah, absolutely. So the nature of the goal, I think, is also worth pointing out. Getting the headed goal, it was really well directed. He kind of spins it against the momentum of the cross and finds the top corner. So if he can keep up on this sort of rate of scoring and gets one every other game, then he'll be very good for us.
Yeah, what have you made of him so far? Obviously, we haven't had too much chance to see him, Ben.
Yeah, I've been impressed. I like how hard he works. He chases the ball and he runs around, makes those runs even if he's not being found. And it changed the style of play slightly having him there because we put more crosses in the box and we scored from one of them. Whereas in some of the other games, I think they've sort of been passing it around the edge and they've always looked for the pullback instead. Whereas in the game at Birmingham, you could definitely tell, let's whip a few more balls in there because he's a target to find. So
yeah, he's a bit more of a physical presence than Pelle Clement, who was working hard in that role that he was given as the central striker, but never really felt comfortable. He's one of those, what do they call him, false nines?
Yeah, you could tell he was filling in that role, really, couldn't you? That's not his main position, I think.
Yeah, and Joseph Mendes never fully looked comfortable either. But let's go look at the back as well, Mark, because we mentioned that clean sheet and touched on Vito Minone a little bit, but the men in front of him, they switched back to the back five, Thiago Ilori coming in as well. Do you think this is the way to go away from home now? Do you think they need that extra body at the back?
Well, we've spoken about it before, and I think that The thing is that if you play 3, the more Ilori McShane 3, then the question is, like, what sort of cover? What's if one of them gets injured? Can you bring Vandenberg back? And, those questions are still going to remain. But for now, this performance, I think, has shown that back 3 with Gunter and even Blackett at left back is looking more stable now, with Obita not in the team or injured. So for now, I think it definitely is. If one of them gets injured, then we might have to go back to the 4 and just sort of bite the bullet a little bit instead of risking Joey. But the way that we played against Birmingham, it certainly seems that it was a comfortable win as opposed to backs against the wall.
Yeah, you had a lot of defensive sort of bodies and defensive-minded players in front of them as well, Ben. You had Joe Vandenberg start, you had Bakuna in there, and George Evans came on late and grabbed himself a goal as well. Were you pleased to see a bit more of a sort of solid outlook?
Yeah,
Sam?
Definitely. You got that feel straight away from the lineup, and Vandenberg in that role, I think, is better sort of sitting and breaking things up rather than being one of the centre-backs. And Bakuna's got a nice... I don't know, he seems quite tough to me, but he can also drive forward, so it was quite good to have that solid base that like kicks on a little bit, and the result shows, the performance shows it worked really well.
Yeah, and I like the fact that it frees up Liam Kelly to be much more offensive-minded. He doesn't have to worry so much about being back and covering because he's got sort of 7 people, 8 if you include the goalkeeper behind him, so he really is free to be creative and get in and around the box. I remember watching him at Bristol City when he came on and turned the game round, and that day he was allowed to sort of play in that final third, and he did so well. But speaking of final third and pressing, one thing I did notice watching some of the highlights and the extended ones back, Mark, was how little Birmingham seemed to push us. The amount of times I noticed that Paul McShane was up past the halfway line in wide positions, it was almost as if Harry Redknapp hadn't done his homework, because if you looked at how QPR consistently harassed and pressed and pushed us, there didn't seem much of that from Birmingham. Now, was that, do you think, because Reading are just looking better at this stage of the season, or was this a bit of a Birmingham flub?
I think at that stage, you look at how deadline day and how the window unfolded for Birmingham. They signed, God knows, I think they signed 13 players this summer.
Yeah.
I think that at that
14 now.
It was the perfect stage of the season to play them, because I don't think they really focused on the game. They've seemed to be, getting it over and done with. Then Redknapp would go in front of the media and say, well, I still haven't got the team I want. And then he'd go and sign them all on deadline day. That's what he's done so far. So it certainly seems as if he was maybe even using that game as a bit of a dummy run for the owners to then go and reinforce the teams. So we're more than happy to pick up the spoils from that.
Yeah, but what did you make of it? Again, do you think this was more Reading being good or Birmingham being bad? Or
I don't think you can take too much away from Reading. I think they played very well on the day, but I would agree that Birmingham certainly weren't up to scratch or as good as I expected them to be. And like you said, the QPR game kind of set the tone for what you'd expect home teams to do against us when we're playing away, and they didn't take that on board at all, because they gave Reading time and they managed to create. It wasn't just the goals; they did create other chances in this game as well. So
yeah, the best chance that didn't go in undoubtedly fell to Mr. Barrow, who somehow, I've watched this back several times, Mark. I cannot figure out how he misses this. If you've not seen it, go check it out. He's, I'd say, just slightly to the right of the 6-yard box, all of the goal to aim at, and he somehow manages to put it wide of the far post.
It was pretty much the same finish that he did score against Villa. It's from the same position, same sort of scenario, and I mean, it's not good. We'll have to... It's early in his career at Reading. We'll have to put it down as just one of them, because if it happens again, then we might have to start being a little bit worried about him.
Do you think that might be where Barrow's main weakness is, Ben? I know Johnny was speaking in our Tilehurst End Editors chat. He was saying, well, maybe that's why Reading have ended up with him, because that is the flaw to his game.
Yeah, I mean, like Mark said, that's, we haven't seen it that much of him. That's the one thing he's missed. But I always heard that finishing wasn't his strong point. He creates chances, gets in good spaces, but doesn't necessarily bury them all. But if he did, he'd be costing us a lot more money than he did. So I guess that sums him up, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that might be the only thing that slightly does worry me about all of our forward options. And we'll come on to Mr. Iluko shortly, but there doesn't seem to be that predatory 15, 20 goal a season striker in the squad. But again, we'll come on to transfer business shortly. But I'll end it on a positive. It was nice, we've discussed George Evans a fair few times on this podcast. And I didn't really want to touch on the game too much, but we did get past Birmingham in extra time in the Carabao Cup as well. George Evans scoring on that night and scoring up at St Andrews as well, Mark. Do you think he's sort of in the last week or so taken steps forward?
Well, I thought in the League Cup game, the Millwall one, he was kind of... He did score the goal for, from 16 yards out, whatever it was, found it. But there were a couple of times I did notice that he was still hesitant in getting forward. He was still thinking, oh, maybe I saw one where he pointed to, I think the ball was out on the left wing with Gunter. He pointed for Gunter to pass it back, not realising that there was about 10 yards of space in front of him in which he could attack the area. He noticed that about 3 seconds too late, ran into it, but the ball had already gone back then. So it's still a little bit a case of, is he transitioning towards it? Is he getting frustrated with Stam doing it anyway? But 2 goals, I guess you can't really argue.
Where does he fall in the pecking order for you now, Ben?
It's very difficult now with obviously Edwards coming in too. I still like him as a player. He can do a job, but I don't really know what his best role is, really. Like you've said, it's just deciding, does he make that much of an impact on the team? Last couple of games scored a couple of goals, but going back last season, I'm not sure what it is that's the main thing he's adding. Yeah. I know that sounds harsh. He's still a good player, but he's just kind of a there player, isn't he, rather than a star man?
He's shown that he can certainly do a job, but I think that we have seen that, again, there are enough areas of improvement to his game where somebody else can plug in. And like you say, with Dave Edwards coming in as well, it is difficult to see where he's going to fit in. But look, if he keeps scoring goals and making impact, he's going to make it very hard for Yap to keep him out of the team. So long may it continue. As I said, it's great. Whenever we speak about a player in a negative way or a questioning way, it's not because, we like bashing them. It's to, sort of say, hopefully there's more from them. So it's sort of laying down a challenge, and hopefully George can step up and make that difference. Anything else from the League Cup game from either of you two that you want to take out? Obviously, going to extra time, but got through the glamour reward being a home tie with Swansea in the next round. But that withstanding, anything stand out for you?
It was nice to see Sam Smith get his first goal. That's important. We've seen a lot of young strikers come into the team in these League Cup games and have a good game or get a goal. Scored? Craig Tanner.
Yeah.
Scored in a couple of years ago.
Nicholas Bignell getting a few.
Yeah, Mooney, Lawson Dath, all these players have come in on cup games and done well. So it's that first necessary step, and now he's got to make the next couple of steps and get a league goal, maybe a league start under his belt. That's the sort of stuff that's going to be on his agenda for the next year, and it's the fact that we haven't actually signed another striker opens the door for him to do that a little bit.
Yeah, he did well. I was pleased with him. The other one, again, last time I was here, we spoke about Rinomota playing well in midfield. And
yeah, very much.
He started this game and he's playing right back, wasn't he? And he did a great job there as well, to be honest. Looked a really good player. So it's nice to see that he's one to look out for still, even in that position. So. Yeah,
and it's nice to get deeper into the cup. I took the mick a little bit out of Swansea there, but look, it's a winnable tie we've got in the next round. Yeah. You win that, you're into round 4. That's what the last 32. And suddenly you get a good draw there, and you're really in the latter stage of the competition. It's a very winnable game. Hopefully get a decent crowd. I'm sure the club will keep the ticket prices down again. So, one to look forward to.
Yeah,
but anyway.
Obviously Barrow hat-trick.
Oh, yeah, clearly.
There, so.
Yeah. I mean, it's ultimate revenge for Wembley if we knock them out of the League Cup.
Yeah, that'll show up.
Yeah, that'll
downright. It's only a shame that Gylfi won't be back, but
we'll get Everton in the next round. That's fine.
Absolutely. Anyway, let's roll on to news bites. We've got a couple of contracts to talk about, another cup game, and then after that we'll be on for our pub chat, which will round up the transfer window.
Reading News Bites on the Tilehurst End Podcast.
Okay, let's start off with a very procedural and quite dull news bite, but it is important. The home game with Barnsley has been postponed due to our Carabao Cup commitments. I believe due to be played on the 12th?
For September.
Yep, 12th of September on the Tuesday night. It has been postponed due to... it's long and complicated, but basically Barnsley have to play a Carabao Cup game on that date. There's no other day they could play it, so Reading have had to very reluctantly postpone it. They weren't happy about it at all, but they have to go along with it. So a date for that one is to be confirmed. Moving on, I mentioned we had another cup tie to talk about. Unfortunately, the under-21 suffered penalty heartbreak in the EFL trophy. The former Checkatrade trophy. It's been every name under the sun, Johnston's paint, whatever you want to call it. The old competition that was for the lower 2-tier sides. You might remember under-21 teams came in last year. They're still in it, including ours. And they drew 2-2 on the night. They conceded a late goal, and then it goes to a penalty shootout for a bonus point. And unfortunately, we lost 6-5. So more heartbreak, Mark. Ban penalties.
Yeah, and for those the thousands of fans that made the long trip to Colchester.
49 away fans, I believe.
That's more than I'd have thought it'd be. That's fair enough.
Colchester's lowest attendance for a professional game in their history, I do believe, unfortunately.
I'm not sure I call it a professional game against a academy team.
Would you call it a semi-unprofessional joke of a game?
Well, it's a semi-academy game. I don't know. There must be some sort of technical term. We should be there. Then it'd be a semi.
Absolutely.
We should have the club's dominance of their media channels for this. Make it a real, Mickey
Got a
Taylor
game of questionable integrity. You know the website to call.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a couple of decent young prospects in there playing against league players. So it's nice that I'm not a massive fan of the competition, but from a selfish point of view, they didn't make a fool of themselves.
Yeah, Ben, I was quite surprised because I thought Stan might give a couple of fringe players, whether it was a McCleary or a Mendes or someone like that, some game time. Very much didn't. He went for a very, very young team. I think the average age was something like 19 or...
We did last year. We did play like Mendes and Vice and that lot,
didn't we? Not so much this year. And I think the squad numbers added up to something in the 490s. Which
that says it all, yeah.
Goes to show you just the nature of the side. But, I mean... What are your general thoughts on this competition? Are you a fan of it?
Not massively, to be honest. It's not one I pay too much attention to. I'm more than happy for it to be a chance to give the youngsters a run out and get some game time because, it can only be valuable to them, I suppose, to be playing matches like that. So it's a funny one, really, isn't it? I don't think too many people are that fussed about it.
Well, hopefully we get a couple more wins and get ourselves to Wembley anyway, so that'd be nice. A nice, fairly non-pressure game at Wembley would be a refreshing change for us, although inevitably we lose on pens. Moving from the very young to, well, not the very old, but one of the elder statesmen of the squad, even though he's only in his very early 30s. Paul McShane, our skipper, has signed a new contract that will keep him at the club for an extra year. It means he'll stay until the summer of 2019. Good news all round?
Yeah, definitely.
Happy with that continuity, especially for a player who is the captain. You want that dressing room presence, don't you?
Yeah, very much agree. Don't think much more needs to be said about that other than well done, Paul. Another new contract, Jordan Abita, who signs a new 3-year contract, which keeps him at the club until 2020. Again, fans?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's a fantastic player, really, I think. And he's still only 23, possibly, and he's already played 150 odd games. So
Yeah, he's 23 because he's a month younger than me, so I know that. To the date. He's a good player to have around. Not so much talked about transfer-wise this summer. I wonder why that was, despite him playing well. Perhaps the injury front caused that. And moving forward, having him in the team would be good.
I don't think... I like Jordan Abita, and certainly if he shows the sort of form he had in the final couple of games, especially the playoffs last season, I certainly see bigger, better things for him. But just touching on the transfer-wise, I don't think he's shown enough consistent form for a Premier League club to make that punt on him right now. I think top half Championship side is at the level, if you take the average of his performances where he is right now, I think, you could possibly take a punt on potential, but in terms of output, I don't think he's quite shown that Premier League level yet.
I think it's the position as well. If you look at the Premier League fullback positions, I'm not sure there are any really that have come up via the Championship. They've all played in the Premier League or in a top flight somewhere else first, from what I can think.
Yeah, and I think back to the sort of performances that we saw from Ryan Bertrand in his loan season with us, and I don't think Abita has hit that sort of consistency, even that we saw from someone like a Chris Armstrong, or let alone Nicky Shorey, who admittedly is one of the greatest left-backs, probably the greatest left-back we've had in our history. So I think that's possibly what's holding him down, but he finished last season strongly, and hopefully when he comes back from this injury, this will be his chance to kick on. Hopefully he'll use that. Yeah,
definitely. He's like you said, he's a very good player at the top level of the Championship, I think, and he suits the 5 at the back system, or however Stan wants to play, really. He's one of those quite versatile, isn't he? Because of used to play on the wing and all that, he's good going forward, but still solid enough defending. So I'd be happy to have him straight back in the team when he's fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, congratulations to both Jordan and Paul, and to everyone at the club getting those players tied down early. It sort of removes all that uncertainty that we had all of last season with people like Danny Williams. So good to get that done. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of uncertainty, moves in, out and around. It was transfer deadline day, just in case you missed it, this week. So we will round up what happened for Reading. Spoiler alert, not a lot. And also look at the wider transfer window that is coming up in the return of Pub Chat.
The Tilehurst End Podcast.
By Reading fans, for Reading fans.
Okay, let's face it, transfer deadline day was a bit of a damp squib as far as Reading concerned. Yes, we had Jacob South-Klein and his Bushwatch antics, which, to Gents, I'm sure you'll both agree, the guy does absolutely stellar work and has become a really fun part of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to how this progresses as he gets older and into, when he has a family and he brings his kids along and he has that. I see this being a real long-term thing.
Yeah, he's a cult hero now, I think, isn't he? And rightly so, yeah. Long may it continue.
Yeah, what happens though if we get back to the Premier League? Because, Sky Sports News and other media are going to be there.
He's going to need a Bush disguise then, isn't he?
I think Sky Sports News should just employ him, just straight out.
Yeah, I think so. We'll get the campaign going. Live to a Bush at the Medeski Stadium. Well done to Jacob. Fantastic work on social media and periscoping, and it's been picked up by the BBC and everybody wants a piece of it. So, cracking work. It isn't all fun and games. He does have to stand around and be on constant alert for transfers. So, as much as I'm sure that all the kudos and nice wishes are good for him, he still has to go and do the job, in inverted commas. So well done to you, Jacob. Congrats on yet another successful Bush watch. Anyway, unfortunately, Jacob didn't have anything to report on because the much heralded hunt for a striker proved fruitless. The club said they were working on deals right up to the last minute, but just couldn't get anything over the line mark. Lots of names were mentioned. Nelson Oliveira, Tomer Hemed. We even saw again Shane Long's name pop up and all sorts, but ultimately nothing through the door.
I think the problem I had with it was that the names being touted were just a little bit too far out of our league, I felt. If we were going to, Dwight Gale was another one who was floating around, not for us, but for, £18 million or something. Oliveira looked like an impossibility for a long time. Hemed, I can't imagine why he would have left Premier League football to come and play for us. It just seemed like that striker was always a little bit too far away. We never had the golden nugget of an actual logical rumour come through for the strikers, did we?
Did it sour the window for you, Ben, that we didn't get this striker that Stam had talked so openly about throughout the summer?
Not too much for me personally. I think, as with anything, it would have been nice. You can say that every year, can't you? It would be nice to add an extra couple of players, nice to add that star man. But I still think it's been a successful window overall, and to be careful not to let a dull deadline day taint a good window, I think.
Absolutely. And when you consider that in the few days leading up to the deadline, we did get another 2 transfers in through the door. First, Dave Edwards, as we mentioned, the midfielder has arrived from Wolves on an undisclosed fee. Do you have any idea how much that was, Mark?
No, I can't. Did he have much of his contract left over?
I don't think too much.
Because...
Tis the era of undisclosed transfers.
Yeah, Aluko only had 12 months left and we forked out quite a lot for him, didn't we?
The fee for that one seemed to slip out, but not for Edwards. But anyway, he's arrived from Wolves. I can't imagine for a great deal of money. If you go and read our opinion from a Wolves fan on him, he sort of said he's sort of surplus to requirements based on the style that Wolves are trying to play and all of the millions they've been spending. But look, he is a very solid Championship pro, Ben. He's been, if you talk about Championship players and you had to rattle off 20 Championship midfielders, it'd probably be one of the names that crop into your head. Yeah,
he's been around and done the business for a long time now. And he seems like such a nice bloke as well. Whenever I see him interviewed, he seems like a really top guy. And everyone says how much they like him. So I think it's partly presence around the dressing room as well, that kind of thing. But I think he scored a lot of goals last season, didn't he? He's that sort of player.
He's their top scorer for, I think, the first half of the season.
Yeah, so there you go. He's one of those who arrives timely in the box and slots in a nice finish. So I can only add to the squad. Good to have competition in there as always, and I like him as a player.
Yeah, reading everything again from our Chums at Wolves blog and from what I've seen of him myself, Mark, he does just seem a bit of a slightly upgraded version of George Evans.
Yeah, the player that I actually was thinking of briefly then was Steve Sidwell. Perhaps a bit of an all-action kind of midfielder might do us well in that sense. But to be honest, whenever I've watched him, I've always rated him quite highly. I think he's a good player. Will on Tilehurst End, who is obviously on the Welsh side of things, has a very high admiration level for him. So it's a good signing. I think it's a good Championship signing. Wolves don't need him. You can maybe think that it's a bit of a downer bringing in someone who's surplus to requirements from another Championship team, but we've done it before with these sort of signings and made it work.
Yeah, and he adds a little bit more steel and nous and experience at midfield, Ben, because you look at the players that were left. You had George Evans, Liam Kelly, John Swift, all in their very early 20s and sort of less than sort of 100 Championship appearances each. This adds that I've been there and done it. I can sort of guide you through the game in maybe some of those moments where we've seen the midfield go to pieces. Hopefully he'll be a player that's able to stop that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's one of the reasons in mind, and that's why they bought him. he's an arm around the shoulder kind of person, isn't he? Or grab you by the scruff of the neck and get you going. I think you're right to say that experience counts for a lot in this division, definitely. And he won't do any harm having him around them, both during games and in training, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of when we signed Brynjar Gunnarsson ahead of the 2005-06 season. He had that sort of experience level and was a really good sort of foil for Harper and Sidwell. So,
and Ledgerwood is another one, I'd say.
Yes,
similar sort of signing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be fascinating to see where he fits into that midfield. I'm sort of imagining in my head an Edwards, Bacuna and one of Swift or Kelly trio.
Yeah, well, I think it could. If we're playing 5 at the back, I could imagine having a sort of 3-man midfield with either Vandenberg or Bacuna holding, with Kelly and Edwards allowed to go and make things happen up front with should have enough protection behind them.
Yeah, I agree. It's a difficult conundrum to have now, I suppose, isn't it, where you fit them all in, but that's Stam's problem to worry about and not ours, I suppose. It's nice to have that competition, and you know that, if you don't put in a performance one week, there'll be someone breathing down your neck to take that spot, and it makes you play better, I hope.
Yeah, and it gives opposition managers a real headache because suddenly they don't know what Reading are going to play. They've got that plan A, plan B, plan C in there now. And that's not even including players like Rinomota, Stephen Quinn, Josh Barrett, lots of different options for Stam to play with. So fingers crossed he'll make a real difference there. And then the big eye-catching deal done a couple of days ago, Sonny Aluko. This was one that was rumoured for months on end. Finally came to a conclusion. He's joined Reading for a reported £7.5 million. Now, I can't believe for the life of me that is a fee we've paid straight up. I imagine there is a lot of incentives and bonuses and instalments in there. But even so, Mark, if for a deal that could reach that amount, it's a staggering amount of money for Reading Football Club to pay.
And a lot of money for a player who, I like Sonny Aluko. He had a very good year last year and he seems to be starting, they made him captain at Fulham this year, so they obviously rate him highly. But has he ever really made it? Are you looking at a player whose career, went from Birmingham to Aberdeen, had a decent spell at Aberdeen, went to Hull, Wolves, I think, as well, and just kind of floated around the championship levels, had one good season at Fulham. Now he's worth £7.5 million. I'm not so sure. But as we say, if we're going to end up paying £7.5 million, then that means theoretically we'd have got promoted and he'd have scored 30 goals for us.
Yeah, Ben, are you happy spending that much money on Aluko?
It's difficult to say. I mean, I agree that he's a good player at this level. He had a great season last season. I think he certainly added to the team, but I have no idea what anyone's worth anymore, to be honest. The transfer window's been kind of crazy, isn't it? And you see Nahki Wells to Burnley for only £5 million. It makes you think, who's deciding who's worth what? Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and we had I'll get to this question out of the way now from Mike in the mailbag. He asked Nahki Wells for £5 million or Sonny Aluko for $7.5 million. Which would have been the better deal? Which of the two would you preferred?
Probably Wells, knowing he's that much, but Stam really wanted Aluko. From what I could tell, that's the one player that he was talking about in the media. He obviously has a plan for him, and if he's gonna create some sort of tactic with Barrow one wing and Aluko on the other, maybe he has a plan for that.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think it's more about Stam buying players for his style and doing essentially what Fulham did last season anyway. They played this fluid front line, didn't they? And they all swapped places, and we do that from time to time. So I don't think it's that Aluko's brought in as a forward across the front three, isn't he? He's not just a winger. He will be playing through the middle at times, I'm sure, and getting goals. So, I mean, I like Nahki Wells as well. I think they're both decent prospects and would be both very good signings for Reading, so I'm just pleased we got one of them.
It's important to remember, I think, that Fulham last year under Jokanovic played an incredibly similar style of football to us.
Yes.
Watching them, certainly when they came to the Medeski in the regular season games, you saw a team that had the same flaws but also the same sort of pros, the same way of getting towards the goal. And if Aluko was the key part of that, then theoretically you can be the key part of that for Reading.
Yeah, and I wrote an opinion piece up on the Tilehurst End that you can read now, and I think Aluko is a key part of trying to evolve this style from not just being a functional one that can grind out games, but one that can entertain. He's a player that likes to dribble with the ball, that likes to have a shot. So having him and Barrow, and not to mention the likes of McCleary and Behrens and stuff, again, lots of options and combinations for Stam to toy with, and hopefully he's going to be another player that's going to get us off our feet. Like you said, Mark, he's going to fit into the system straight away. He's going to be used to retaining the ball and trying to work it like that. So, you talk about the settling in period. Hopefully there shouldn't be a lot of that for Aluko. is we can hit the ground running and really go for that. It does make me uneasy at the money we've spent, simply because I don't know enough about where the money's coming from. I don't really know what the long-term motivations are for the Chinese. I don't know if this is a loan, if this is just a gamble, if this is something that we are conscious that we're going to fail FFP, but we're just going for it. Plenty of unanswered questions, but if you're on the glass half full thing, you've got to say, what a sign of ambition.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and even from, if you put yourself in Aluko's shoes and he's been captain of Fulham, as you said, start of the season, and Fulham are everybody's darling in this league, aren't they? And one of the favourites to go up, and he's leaving them to come to us to fight for promotion. That suggests that the mentality at Reading has shifted now, doesn't it? That, you know, we are really going for it.
Yeah, Mark, you wrote a piece up on the website as well, talking about how the ambitions and the benchmark has risen now from this window. Sort of explain to those who haven't had a chance to check it out what you meant.
Well, as Ben said, there's not many times when we've gone to a divisional rival and plucked their best player or one of their best players. That's kind of unprecedented from this club's point of view. The thing is, moving forward, if we don't go up this year, you know, obviously next year will be about we'll have to go up. And if we don't go up that year, then you have to say that the next 2 seasons, depending on how willing how long you're willing to give it, it's kind of promotion or bust. All of those questions you had just then will be answered by promotion. All of the debt and all of the loans and everything, it goes away overnight if you get, you know, £90 million per season just for turning up. If we don't get promoted, then they continue to fester. Stam might go, players might get fed up, you might find it tough to bring in players for reasonable fees and have to, you know, it all snowballs and escalates. And we've seen at teams like Derby, Sheffield Wednesday to a limited extent, perhaps Wolves as well, although they're in their own little money tree at the moment. It doesn't bode well unless you can actually go up.
Yeah, it doesn't guarantee success splashing out, but as we've just said, he's a player that we know will fit into this system, so it's not as big a risk as some other players might be.
Yeah, so there was always that risk if you spent the 5 to 10 million on an Oliveira or a Wells, that they don't necessarily fit in because they're both coming from clubs that play different styles of football. Huddersfield a little bit more direct, they're Gengen pressing, and obviously at Norwich a bit more direct as well. So yeah, this is a no risk in terms of style, but yeah, for me it's still a bulky risk. I think looking through the entire transfer business from this window, Mark, you're looking at roughly 15 million if you take the average of sort of the fees quoted for each of these 7 key signings. And the incoming end, I think we made about 300 grand for El Habsi. So, you know, that is a balance sheet that has, again, never been matched in this club's history, even in the Premier League years.
Perhaps. I think the wages might be a little bit lower than we've been used to in the Zingarevich era. Certainly should be anyway. And, you know, it's looking at whether the team is stronger on that sort of basis. The team is stronger, and therefore we're closer to promotion, and therefore that's exciting. You think of how close we were to promotion last year. We got a better team this year, therefore, you know, ...
Yeah, and Ben, this sort of erases any of those sort of people, you know, we especially remember a few years ago, those where's the money gone people, and who shout at the owners for not giving that team the final kick. They have put realistically about as much as you could ever hope for a club our size to put in one window. Yeah,
certainly. I don't think you can complain that they're not putting their hand in their pocket. It's very impressive to me and surprising for what we're used to at Reading. It marks a change in moving forward now, really. I think we've become one of those teams that now does spend a bit of money, and I suppose that's possibly something you're going to have to do now because of the amount of money in football. If you look at the other teams in the Championship, some of them have still spent a lot more than us. So
yeah, there's as I said, footballers. I don't want to say football's gone mad, but the whole benchmark, like you say, what is a good transfer fee now? What is a bargain? I just don't know. But let's look at the window over a whole before we move on. As mentioned, 7 people on the way in, and on the way out, we've picked out sort of 8 major players that are left. There's obviously a few more youngsters and stuff, but the key players sort of left or who featured semi-regularly had Ali El Habsi, Jake Cooper, Danny Williams and Dom Samuel all go. Dennis Rackles has gone out on loan, and then we also lost Lewis Graben, Jordan Much and Reece Oxford at the end of their loan spells. On the inside, you had Vito Minone, Pella Clement, Leandro Bacuna, Dave Edwards, John Daddy Budvarsson, Mo Barrow and Sonny Aluko. So Ben, starting with you, is that squad now better than the one that finished last season?
Yeah, definitely for me.
Yep. Mark?
I'd say so. Yeah, I think so.
how much better is it? If you had to sort of rate that, the old squad out of 10 and the new squad out of 10, what would you give it?
Whoa, put me on a spot.
Can I break that down?
Yes.
The first 11 used to be, let's say, a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay.
I think it's still just about a 7.5 out of 10. But the squad, let's say it used to be a 6 out of 10, is now an 8 out of 10.
Interesting. Ben?
Yeah, I'd go along a similar line. I think our starting 11 has probably improved slightly if Aluko's playing up there and if Kermagant was fully fit. So I'd give it an 8 just to add on that extra 0.5 from Aluko.
Yeah, Bodvarsson's the X factor for me, is in how good is he, because I haven't seen too much of him. I'm pretty confident that everybody else that's coming in is at least sort of a level to the people that have lost. Vito Minone, I've been very impressed.
Very impressed, yeah. He's gone under the radar, hasn't he?
Yeah, not missed a beat.
Just as goalkeepers should do, I think.
Exactly. Clement's got potential without really massively hitting his stride so far. Bakuna has already scored a great goal and has shown plenty of willingness. Dave Edwards, you mentioned, hasn't made his debut, but I think we know what we're going to get. Bodvarsson's got his goal. Mo Barrow has been sort of electric and comedic at times, but exciting nonetheless. And Sonny Aluko, again, we just touched on, we sort of know what he can do at this level. So, yeah, I think the starting 11 has gone up just a tiny notch. Again, if you're talking 7.5, I'm thinking maybe up to an 8. And the squad, I think about the same as well. What I don't want to do is get into the trap I think that we fell into at the end of Steve Clarke's summer transfer window, where we signed all those players and we went, oh yeah, this squad's great, it's got so much depth.
Yeah.
And then when it came to actually use the depth on a regular basis, when we had to play a Pearson every week, it actually wasn't quite as strong as we thought.
Yeah, it came down to the mental strength of that team, and we got to find out now if the mental strength of these new players can match what was actually quite a good sort of dressing room last year, and if they can add to that.
Yeah, this team seems very different mentally from that one. I think Stam at the top has that winning mentality, and Steele, and that filtered down last season, and you'd hope that would continue. When you hear them all, they're all singing off the same hymn sheet, as it were, and I quite like the togetherness that's in the squad. Let's just hope that stays with these additional players coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, to Brian Tavraden, Ron Gourlay and Jaap Stam, it's a thumbs up from all of us. Done fantastic work. Said it's been an exciting window. We've seen some big money spent. We've seen a lot of... They've taken a fairly bold gamble in the players they've let go. They've not been overly sentimental. They've said goodbye to the Aaron Calls, the Jack Stacey's, the Jake Coopers. Players that, look, they could come back and haunt you, but the club have stuck to their guns and said, no, look, we're moving forward. So credit to them. And speaking of moving forward, there has been changes on the coaching staff as well. The day after deadline day, 2 new faces on the scene. Scott Marshall will be taking over as the under-21 / under-23 head coach. He replaces Martin Cool, who'd been at the club for 17 years now, dad of Aaron, who left this summer. And also, in the first team coaching department, Stephen Reed, who left this summer, has been replaced by a man who you should know very well listening to this podcast, even if you might not have seen him, Michael Gilks. Gilks is back, Ben.
Yeah, excellent. I think he's filling that Stephen Reed role, and he's a similar sort of character from what I know, but with the added extra that he's a Reading legend and, highly regarded in these parts. So I think it's a good move to have him in there. Always nice to have someone with a bit of history at the club involved still.
Yeah, finally we might see Chris Gunn to do a proper overlap.
Like it, yes. I wrote on Twitter earlier, I think he's going to get on really well with Mo Barrow. I think he can get the best out of him. So,
yeah, he's got that turn of pace, hasn't he?
Yeah, although Gilksy's crossed always did seem to let him down at the last minute from my memory. So he'd do the hard bit of beating 3 people and then the cross would end up into the wrong bit of the South Bank. But no, look, he was an absolute Reading legend. He's always seemed like the nicest bloke. I think he did get interviewed on the old Royals Post podcast. I'll have to dig that one out of the archives, or even when it was the Football Fan Cast. So might have to try and see if we can resurrect that one, or even get him back on the show at some stage. So yeah, best of luck to Gilksy and to Marshall as well. Again, the club owes a big thank you to Martin Cool. He's been there working closely with the late Eamon Dolan, part of a very, very successful academy era, and best of luck to him moving forward. And he even managed the first team for a couple of games when Steve Clarke left. So best of luck to Martin Cool, and of course to Stephen Reed as well. So best of luck and best wishes to them. Anyway, that about rounds up our thoughts on the transfer window. It's time to turn the show over to you. It's mailbag time.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
at The Tilehurst End.
And facebook.com/The Tilehurst End.
As always, massive thanks to everyone who's chipped into the mailbag via @The Tilehurst End on Twitter, thetilehurstend@gmail.com for your emails, and facebook.com/The Tilehurst End. We've also got the YouTube channel up at youtube.com/Tilehurst End. Myself and Ollie recorded a pre-transfer deadline day video. So little nuggets like that and the post-game shows and things like that go up. Not as often as I'd like, but we try and keep it as busy as we can. No, episodes of this show go up there as well. So, if you're stuck and you haven't got your favourite podcasting app with you, you can always head on to YouTube and listen to the latest show there as well. And an even bigger thank you to everyone who continues to support the show via patreon.com, including Simon Yelovich, who's chipped in this week. It makes such a big difference to what we do here. It is our crowdfunding scheme. I know I talk about it every week, but that's because, of the difference it makes. It's the reason why you hear this in hopefully a good audio quality and bits and pieces like that, because, we can only buy microphones and things like that because of your generosity and the funds you help give us. So if you've got a couple of quid a month, you like what we do, look, if you like a book or a magazine and stuff, you pay for your subscription to that. We love doing this out of the goodness of our hearts, and because more importantly than that, we're Reading fans. We love talking about it. But look, it does make a big difference if we get a bit of change in through the door. So if you head over to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/The Tilehurst End, even if it is just $1 a month, which is about 70-80p, although in post-Brexit world, $1's probably about 20 quid, isn't it, Mark? something along those lines. But look, again, if everybody listening to this show, by our average viewing figures, chips in $1 a month, we would be absolutely set and almost going pro. So, do the right thing and join the inner circle.
And if you don't pay for it, then every 20 minutes in the podcast, we're going to have to start talking about Carabao.
Exactly, yeah.
I do love Carabao, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope they heard that.
We are happy to sell out to the highest bidder. And if the highest bidder is your group generosity, that is all the better. Anyway, thank you again to everybody who's continued to help out. But anyway, mailbag time. Starting with the two unfortunates, Rob, who was on the show just last week. He says, not quite understanding why Aluko costs so much more than Barrow, who's younger and seemingly just as good.
I guess it's based on their standing within the club they've come from as well, because like we were saying earlier, Aluko, key man at Fulham, a rival in the division, Barrow, a fringe player at the Premier League, clearly not wanted by the current management, so that dictates their value to some extent. But again, it's been a funny old transfer window, and it's really hard to gauge what is value for money now.
Yeah, it's all relative, isn't it? I think the only thing I'd say about Barrow is he's not really done it anywhere. He's had a few loans and not really done it. And then at Swansea, he's always been a substitute mainly, whereas Aluko last year did have a very good campaign.
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to that potential versus track record, and you know exactly what you're going to get from Aluko. And in fact, he is very valued at his parent club, whereas Barrow very much surplus to requirements and just getting him off the books, and he's not really going to hurt Swansea when he leaves them either. So that brings his price down a touch as well. Mike, as mentioned, asked us about Nahki Wells for Sonny Aluko. Matt asks, will Roy Behrens leave? And he's also surprised we didn't see more people leave during the transfer window as a whole. We didn't really touch on the outgoings in our discussion. The only one to go on deadline day was Mr. Sandro Vesa.
Big miss.
Yeah, our Luxembourg hero. He went out on loan to the same Belgian side where we sent Denzel Gravenberch.
Yeah, dream team over there.
Absolutely. What a midfield dynamo. But yeah, Mark, are you surprised you didn't see anyone leave on deadline day?
Let's talk about Quinn leaving potentially. I'm glad he didn't leave. I wasn't expecting too many more. The fact that we've got a stockpile of wingers isn't so much a accident. I think it's deliberate from the club's point of view. It's very deliberate that we're going to have McCleary, who's not going to be fit very often, Behrens just coming back, and Popper all competing to get into that space, because it's arguably the most important creative part of the team. So having a lot of options, certainly in a long season such as this, might not be a bad thing.
Where do you think Behrens stands, Ben?
I think he's good quality off the bench. I think with now Barrow, Aluko and McCleary ahead of him, he's more of a fringe player this season, but he's a good player to have within the squad, and to come on for 20 minutes. He still pops up with some assists, can't he, every now and then, but he's not quite as exciting as the others, is he? Not quite as pacey and dynamic. I think that's what they've gone for now with the new signing.
Yeah, and I think he was being sort of phased out towards the end of last season. I think he was a very good player to have because he knew the system and what Stam wanted to do, so he helps players around him. But now that a lot more of the players are used to that system, his limitations become more apparent. I think like you said, I think he'll have a role.
Yeah, I think the thing with wingers in general, from nearly every winger I can remember at Reading, is consistency isn't always there. So they have these spells, don't they, where they play really well, or flashes in games that are great, but playing well every game of the season doesn't always happen on the wing. So it's nice to have those options to bring in and freshen up when you need to.
Yeah, just on the squad in a whole, I think they've got good balance. The squad does seem big, but again, it's only mostly the wingers. Elsewhere, maybe you could say they're carrying one extra centre midfielder, too many, but we've seen in the past with the rate that players like Quinn and Vandenberg seem to pick up injuries, and John Swift's dealing with a problem, and there's no guarantee how he'll recover from that. So I can understand why they've been maybe that little bit extra cautious. And also, it's just a case of, did anybody come in for these players? Because if they didn't, again, you can't just force a player out. So if no bid materialised, then the Reading's hands were tied.
Yeah, I think they're pretty happy with the squad on a whole, and they'd have listened to offers for some of those people, I think, if they'd have come in. But as you rightly said, if no one's after them, then you don't need to force them out. Just stick as it is and be happy with it.
Absolutely. Darren Seymour says the owners are showing faith by spending big, in brackets finally. Time for Stay Away fans to get back and cheer this team on. Law Rule says a great away win at Birmingham. So what went right this time? I'm sure you'll discuss in the podcast. It's great to have the show back. Thank you very much. I hope we did cover what went right as opposed to what went wrong in the recap section. Luke Rogers, do you see a playoff challenge being possible with this current side? I think yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And Bradley's sent us sent an email. He says, "Hi guys, long time listener, first time emailer. Great work with the podcast and website. It certainly helped make the daily commute from Basingstoke to Waterloo a bit more bearable." Yeah, I can imagine, especially with recent works at Waterloo. Hopefully we've done our bit for you there, Bradley. Thanks for emailing in. He says, "So for the last few days of the transfer window has certainly picked up. Comments regarding Aluko from the Fulham manager when we were first linked got me thinking. Jokanovic was not happy with potentially losing Aluko and also was unhappy with Fulham's transfer policy. Apparently he has absolutely no say over who they sign, who stays and who goes. This got me thinking. Do you have any insights or thoughts on what Reading's recruitment policy is as far as identification and signing off on incoming transfer targets and who leaves? How do we identify targets and ensure their suitability for our squad and system? Is it a moneyball approach combined with scouting? And what part do Brian, Yap and Ron play in the acquisition of new targets? Who gets the final say?"
You're looking at me.
You are a transfer guru.
The person who has the inside knowledge, apparently. From what I can tell in the media, anyway, is that whenever Yap Stan gets asked about transfer targets, he says that it's not him who deals with it. It's Brian who chiefly, from what I can tell, does the dealings. Ron as well will have a big play in that. You know that because Ron is the person who's there on the unveiling day. Mm-hmm. He's the person who speaks to the club website and he's the person shaking the player's hand. As to who identifies these targets, I imagine it's a combination of the scouts delivering reports and then Yap Stan. I think he'll definitely have a say as to who he wants because, as we've seen, when he talks about Aluko, when he talked about Oliveira in the media, he was very intent on naming those players and saying those are the ones that I want. So, logic dictates that Stam certainly has an amount of saying on who. Maybe not so much the younger players who come into the team, but even the ones like Gravenberch, he knows of Clement, and these are still the fringe players that we're talking about, and up to the first team stars as well. I think he still has a decent amount of say, but he doesn't get involved in the negotiations. Yeah,
I'd agree with that. Stam doesn't strike me as a yes man or someone who would sit back and let it all happen. He seems pretty proactive to me, and I can't imagine he's not involved to some extent. And I think it helps that him and Brian obviously have a connection, and we now have a set style, don't we? Everyone knows how Reading plays, so they are identifying players that will come and fit into that, I think, now.
I think you're both right. I think it is a real combination effort. I would imagine the sort of system goes where Brian Tavraden identifies a target. He says to Yap, "What do you think about this guy? I think we can get him." do you think he'd fit in with the squad? And yeah, probably has to say yes, or well, let's give him a try and see. And then the negotiations themselves are probably handled mostly by Ron Gourlay. And he deals sort of what used to happen with Nick Hammond. Nick Hammond, would listen to a Steve Coppell or a Brian McDermott, and then Hammond would get the paperwork and stuff done and deal with speaking to the owners and getting the sign off and approval. So Gourlay's probably that link man with the money. And Brian Tavraden's probably the link man to Ron and to Yap. And then Yap obviously deals with the players. I do think there is a certain amount of providing players for a system, not just a manager. I can imagine that is why we've seen Sandro Vessa and other people arrive, because I can't imagine that's a Yap Stam saying, let's go
and get me Sandro Vessa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
that's what every manager's saying.
Yeah. So I do imagine there is a certain amount of, I think we can get this player, I think he'll do well in the squad, and maybe there is a little bit of from Yap saying, okay, I'm not sure, but look, I'll go along with it. And I think that's how increasingly football's working now.
Yeah.
The days of the Sir Alex Ferguson that has every say on who comes and who goes and who comes to the academy, those days are gone. They're absolutely gone. And you only need to see what's happening at Arsenal almost for the downside of that old system. So, look, as for who has the final say, that is the key question. Again, if I had to put my money on it, I'm actually probably going to say Brian Tavraden's got the final say.
I would say it's the Chinese owners have the final say.
Well, yeah, ultimately. Yeah. I mean, they've got the purse strings. But...
yeah, I think that's the thing that they wait on. Otherwise, I don't know.
Well, it's one we'll ask. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to sit down and talk to one of these fine individuals. But I hope that tries to answer your question, Brad. As I said, we'll do our best to try and get to the bottom of that one in the weeks and months ahead. Jack Killick says, finally Reading play 5 at the back away from home and we win. Why do you think it's taken Yap so long to do this? Also, do you think he'll now continue to do this in the future? I'd definitely stick with the 5 at the back away from home, especially when we have a beater back. It would be very dangerous, although fair to play to Blackett for getting an assist. I agree, and I think we covered it in the recap, but Ben, we did play 5 at the back at QPR and that didn't go very well.
Yeah, so then we shouldn't play 5 at the back by that game. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think Yap doesn't particularly have, this is my plan at home, this is my plan away. He has, this is my plan for this opposition, and it changes game to game. And I imagine that's going to carry on. I think they will probably see 5 at the back a lot more away from home this season and playing that Birmingham kind of way. But again, if Birmingham had pressed us and played differently, it might not have worked so well. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I still expect Obita to come into the team when he's fit. I expect him to be the first choice from his availability as opposed to dependent on Blackett's form. But it's nice to see Blackett playing well, and I think that he's still an option to slot in at centre-back as well if we need him to. So him playing well is nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, no, I think his best performances have come as the left side of that back three. I think, again, you go to the playoff semi-final at Fulham, and the home game against Barnsley as well. He's certainly got talent. There's a reason he came through United and played several games for them. So, yeah, long may it continue. And I said the competition is only a good thing. It's going to they're going to push each other on. And look, nothing bad has ever come from that. Richard Holloway just said it was a great win and great to watch it live on iFollow from Singapore. The only comment was that there was no commentary. Yeah, iFollow is the new system that if you live outside of the UK, you can watch most Championship games live now. You can stream them. I think it costs about £15 a month. But yeah, great for exiled Royals to watch, and good to hear that you got to see a win, Richard.
And if they need a commentary team, then I would say look no further.
Oh, absolutely. If you want the best unprofessional joke of a commentary team that cheap money can afford, it is us.
That no money can afford.
Absolutely. And finally, Scott from Arizona, he actually asked this question just before the last show, but I think we were in the middle of recording, so he just didn't make the mailbag. He says, looking at the current top 6 in the table, only Leeds and Wolves were discussed among the pre-season favourites to go up. How would you rank the other 4 clubs in the top 6 in order of likelihood to stay in the race all season? Now, it's obviously a very early table, but the current top 6 are Cardiff, Ipswich, Leeds, Wolves, Sheffield United and Forest. So taking out Leeds and Wolves, Cardiff, Ipswich, Sheffield United and Forest, who do you think is the most likely of those 4 teams?
I'd personally say Cardiff, based on the fact that Warnock's there. We know how he's going to play. He's good at getting a team out of this division and doing well in this division. Ipswich, I think, I've seen some of their highlights and they could have lost some of those games that they've won. They're a little bit all over the place for me. They've done well, obviously, to start, But Mick McCarthy, after they lost to Fulham the other week, said that they were battered about the park and they really should have lost by more. So I can't see them staying up there all season. But yeah, Warnock, he's just got a knack for doing it, really, hasn't he?
Yeah, I very much agree on the Cardiff front. I think Ipswich, I agree with you. They strike me, the goal difference isn't overly inspiring there. They've played 5, scored 9, conceded 6. It's not an overwhelming record either offensively or defensively. They've got a bit of that, when teams like Blackpool have had that early season run and have fallen away. Sheffield United have got the momentum behind them. They look like a team that are very difficult to beat. They've got that winning mentality coming up from League One. And we've seen in the past how teams like Southampton have been able, and Norwich have been able to carry that through. I would certainly say that they're going to be in and around the race. Forest as well. Mark Warburton is a canny manager. They've just signed Adam Federici as well on loan.
Yeah, and they signed a couple of players, I think, didn't they? They were on the telly. They've looked all right. Again, there's lots of these teams that are quite similar in this division, isn't there? And it's just keeping that run going for a longer period, really, isn't it? Everybody has a good run at some point in the season. It's just extending it to stay up there.
Yeah, so I'd say Cardiff. I'd say Cardiff and Sheffield United out of the two, with Cardiff as my favourite out of that. Mark, any differing thoughts?
Looking at how it stood at this point last season, you had Barnsley, Birmingham and Norwich all in the top 6. And QPR, Brentford and Bristol City were the teams closest to knocking onto the door. So I still think it's too early. I give it 10 games. To be honest, I wasn't even aware that Sheffield United, Nottingham Forest and Leeds were doing that well. I
haven't even paid attention. I couldn't honestly tell you where Reading are at the moment. I think are we 11th?
Yeah,
sounds plausible.
There, yeah.
I don't think we're bottom. We're not top. So somewhere in the middle. It's too early. 10 games. 10 games. Ask that question at 10 games.
If you had to put money on it, #GambleAware. Out of those teams,
Cardiff look decent. To be fair, they've got that Warnock factor about them, which I hate, but it works.
Yeah, and Zahora seems a good striker.
And they were talking about him being sold. They've kept hold of him.
Exactly.
So Cardiff, I think, are probably going to be in the mix. Leeds, it's too early to tell under a new manager. Forest, I highly doubt they'll be around it. Sheffield United, again, I highly doubt they'll be around.
Wolves look powerful though, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They look strong and they've made some good signings. They've got so much money, obviously, but then they went to Cardiff, or I don't know where that game was.
I think it was Cardiff.
Yeah, and they obviously Cardiff beat them. So, that's Warnock. The Championship can still beat, this big money and style of football. There's still ways to beat them.
Well, what I noticed on deadline day about Wolves is that they've only got one striker.
Yeah, he's a very good striker, but
they have, a bit untested at this level, but they've only got one out-and-out forward. So keep an eye on that, because that's not a good thing to have at this level, or any level.
Absolutely not. Anyway, one to keep an eye on, and as I said, we'll have a much better idea of how the Championship is shaping up in the coming weeks. In the meantime, that wraps up the mailbag. Thanks to everyone who has chipped in. We've got a very brief any other business to wrap up the show.
The Tilehurst End Podcast.
Any other business?
Right, so talking about predictions, it's safe to say that we've not had a great start in the Prediction League to start the season, Mark. So far, the league leaders are on 3 points, and that's only because we've got one score right this season.
That means it's me.
It is you, yeah. You are joint leading. There are 4 of us on 3 points. Me and you, Johnny and Westy are all on 3. Tom Crocker is on 1, and so is Handbags Harris. So we're not doing terribly well, but last week, I think we all predicted doom, and Reading went and surprised us. So I think I
had 1-1.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
There were lots of 1-0s and 2-0s. It seemed to be the theme of this.
And it's not going to get any better because I'm out of the country for the next month, so I'm going to have no idea how we're playing.
Excellent. Look forward to that one. But next up we've got Bristol City and Brentford. As mentioned, the Barnsley game is off. Well, we won't have a podcast in between those games. Unfortunately, I am away, so we're just not going to be able to do it. Might still be able to get a podcast extra with Tom Crocker in the can. So stay tuned for that. I'll obviously keep people posted on the Twitter feed as much as possible. But just general thoughts on those couple of games, Ben. What are you targeting from them? Is this a 6-point scenario, or would you be happy with 3 or 4?
I think always target the win at home, so definitely 3 from the Bristol game. Brentford away, I've seen some terrible performances there. Watching Reading, it's just one of those places, I think.
We're always awful there.
Yeah,
so they've sold all their players, though.
That's very true. That's true.
Harry Redknapp's taken them. He's come down and got a Groupon deal.
3 for the price of, 3 it actually probably was, but with the amount they paid.
But yeah, I'd probably take a point there, to be honest. So 4 points from those two do me nicely.
Mark?
Yeah, it won't be the worst thing in the world. As long as we win at home, then the away game, it's a little bit of a free ticket in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd like to see us get a point. I think if you want to be in that real top 6 mix, I think you need to start showing some consistency away. And if we get beat there, we talked at the top of the show about how great it was to get that first away win. But if you lose there, 3 away defeats in 4 is...
Maybe a 0-0 clean sheet would be a good result.
I'd absolutely take that. So 4 points, I think, for me, is almost the minimum I think you need to take. I mean, 3, it's not a complete, awfulness, but yeah, I think 4 realistically for keeping that momentum and building something strong. So fingers crossed, everyone comes back from the international break fit and raring to go. Our new signings settle in nicely. And when we are back in a couple of weeks' time, we've got lots of positive things to talk about. But anyway, gents, thank you both very much. Ben, I mentioned it on last week's show, but kudos on the new animation as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so
very much enjoyed it.
Well, let's hope they keep winning because there's a couple more.
Ooh.
Yeah, what are you going to make Dave Edwards into?
Yeah, we'll see.
It's a bit like an Iron Man, I'd say.
Yeah, go check out. Where can people find more of your work as well, Ben?
Well, so benjaminG.co.uk. Thank you very much for that little plug. I do all sorts of stuff. Obviously, the silly Yapstand things, but, do bits and pieces for the club as well, and it's always nice to do it. So
absolutely. So I very much recommend Ben, and Ben, your check will be in the post. It's probably not going to have a lot of zeros on it, but actually it'll have a lot of zeros on it. Probably not a lot of numbers elsewhere. But no, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this week. Mark, pleasure. As you mentioned, you're off soon, so...
yeah, this podcast might be a bit quiet in the next few weeks in that case.
Well, I'll have to try and dig Westy out. He's been on holiday. He was going to come in for this week's show, but then decided to go on holiday to Devon.
Yeah, I could maybe do a Facebook Live from like a beach in Nice or something after one of the games, and then and pretend to know what went on. Absolutely.
My Alexa has just decided to randomly speak about something.
I thought there was someone downstairs.
No, it's, I'll be fascinated to see what it said there.
It's just ordered a flight to Nice for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Anyway, so I really need those Patreon campaigns now. So yeah, if you could keep those coming in, that would be great. Anyway, gents, thank you both. Thank you to everyone who's listening, for everyone who continues to support the show as well. And I'd just like to finish the show. Just condolences as well to Tim Della. His dad Ralph, a quite legendary broadcaster with the BBC, unfortunately passing away today. So our thoughts, everyone here at the Tilehurst End, go out to Tim and his family at this difficult time. So as I said, our condolences go out to the Dellas at this time. But as I said, thank you to everybody who continues to support the show, continues to listen. We'll be back soon. Stay tuned to the Twitter feed for all the latest info, and of course, do read thetilehurstend.com. And in the meantime, go on your R's.
It's funny how the crumbs always leave a trail. Funny how the crumbs always leave a trail. Funny how they always leave a trail. You smile. Funny how the crumbs always leave a trail. Even when it seems there's no trail. Funny how the crumbs always leave a trail.
Tilehurst End Podcast.
Read the blog
on thetilehurstend.com.